Hello, I'm Christine Storey. I'm the Partners in Procurement Energy Network Project Manager. PIPN is the South West England regional partner for SPP Regions, an EU-funded project around sustainable procurement. This module forms one of a suite of how-to capacity building modules within the SPP project. Today we're going to have a quick overview of performance output-based specifications, which some of you will know about, some of you won't, so just bear with me. As it's around sustainable procurement, this project I'm going to do a quick recap. So sustainable procurement is looking at the social, economic and environmental issues and how they can be included in public sector procurement. So issues around workers' rights, contribution to local economic development, air quality, reducing carbon emissions through procurement in terms of procuring certain vehicles. And all of this done within the envelope of public procurement rules, starting at the top with the EU Directive on Public Sector Procurement, moving into your own organisation's rules and policies around this area, and all contributing to the organisational needs and its own purchasing needs. Performance output-based specifications, also known as outcome or outcome-based specifications. The one thing they're not is input specifications. Input specifications are very prescribed, very tightly tied down specifications, which is really the opposite of what we're trying to have a look at here around performance output-based specifications. For a quick kind of overview, POBS tend to be results orientated. They focus on the endpoint rather than the nitty-gritty all the way through. They focus on outputs, outcomes and quality and how that can be dealt with in a contract. The achievement of specific and measurable performance standards or requirements are a key part of POBS contracts. And these can include monetary or non-monetary incentives and disincentives, like additional payments, cost-saving sharing within the contract and elements around that. It specifies what needs to be achieved, not how to achieve it. Unlike an input specification, which very much deals with the how-to, this is very much now around the what and how we can get there in the end. It's key to achieving innovation. Procurement people are really good at procurement. They're not always that on top of everything that is new in terms of technology, innovation, or just a different approach to something. And the market in POBS suggests the optimum way to meet the need. It's not to say that procurement don't have an input, but actually the market are the experts in what they can provide. Some key characteristics. They satisfy a need, particularly around quality, quantity, and reliability. They define a desired result through the measurement of outputs. So they define actually what needs to be achieved at the end of a contract, not actually how to do it through the process. Payment usually relates to output quality and quantity, and payments or retentions are actually based on those through evaluation and performance management. It specifies what is to be performed rather than how to perform it. And I know I keep repeating this, but that really is quite a crucial part of POBS contracts. Bidders have the scope to offer the latest technology, whether this is sustainability technology, innovation, or just generally a whole different way of looking at an issue or a problem to make it better. More key characteristics. It can transfer some responsibility and risk and some assets to the contractor. And this isn't to say that the contracting organisation is actually getting rid of that responsibility and risk, but really putting it where it needs to sit best to make the contract work. The implementation at the start of a contract can be shorter. Successful bidders are familiar with their own processes. They can hit the ground running rather than have to learn and embed themselves into a contracting authority's processes. Performance evaluation is absolutely key, particularly when there's around incentives and disincentives. Those performance evaluation criteria need to be objective, and they need to be agreed, and they need to be on clearly defined metrics, again agreed between the contractor and the contracting authority. Performance measurement is often done in stages. The first one developing an initial baseline, particularly if data is scant or just not available, it hasn't been done before. And obviously there'll be a performance measurement right at the end of the contract as well, but it tends to be stages and payments based on that one as well. And as part of sustainable procurement, you can actually increase sustainability criteria through a POBS. It could be that bidders have a way of looking at an issue that may really contribute to your sustainability policies within your organisation. Some of the key benefits. It definitely motivates suppliers. they can actually be rewarded for their innovation and what they've actually put in before the contract starts. They can develop and implement innovative approaches where they didn't have the opportunity to put those in place before. As I mentioned, it can transfer some of the key responsibilities. And again, this isn't with the contracting authority giving everything up, it's putting it where it's best placed to meet those. It can definitely support the value for money outcome. If you're integrating efficiency, effectiveness and service quality against some performance metrics, then actually you can build on value for money against those as well, particularly if some of the incentives are around saving, sharing, and all the rest like that. It can facilitate innovative approaches, and particularly in this case, contributing to delivering sustainability. Procurement people are really good at procurement. That is their key thing, but they're not always up to date with the most current thinking around sustainability and how it can be implemented. Contractors and bidders quite often are, and that actually makes this such an attractive way of moving forward. 12 key steps to POBS. 12 seems quite a lot to be key steps, but actually it's all around the procurement process. Again, these are steps, they're not actually sequential. One of them will be happening at the same time as other ones go along as well. Number 1, stakeholder engagement and understanding is completely key. You need to know your stakeholders and get them on board, and to get them understanding why you want to go through this process. Identify a suitable POBS candidate. If you haven't done this type of contracting before, it can be a little bit daunting. Pick one which you know is manageable, where there's an easy endpoint that you know that has to be met. Create the team from the stakeholders and from others. A team could include procurement, finance, legal, specialist input, but also, depending on what you are contracting for, it could also actually include end users as well to give you that end benefit. What's the context of the tender? Is it within the procurement context? Is it within priorities and policies of your particular organisation? And then looking at all of that, develop a draft performance specification. This gives you something to discuss at a later date, and particularly when you're looking at your market engagement. And that's actually one of the steps, market engagement strategy. Develop a strategy and actually stick to that. Make sure the market's engaged. Learn from others, both internal and external. People have done this before. They've made mistakes and they've got it right, and both those aspects are really important. Establish the draft performance metrics. What are you going to measure? What's important and why is it important? What can be moved, what can't be moved? And also, similarly, what are the incentives or disincentives that you would like to include in the contract? And again, don't make those too difficult. If an incentive is too easy to achieve for a contractor, they're just going to go, right, that's just normal business, we can meet that easily, tick in the box of that, and they get their incentive payment. Conversely, don't make it too challenging. If the contractor is never going to get to the target you've set because it's too difficult, they're not even going to bother trying, and thereby you lose some really good impetus that has been built up. Following that, use all of the above to develop your tender documentation, run your procurement process, your supplier selection, and then your usual post-award management. And within that post-award management, how are you going to implement and start that contract going? Key challenges: a lack of clear direction from leaders. And this can link to the point below about risk. If leaders aren't particularly clear about where they're going and how much risk they're likely to give up, or willing to give up, or to move on to something else, and actually this can be a little bit difficult as well, particularly if they change their mind halfway through. Defining the appropriate incentive systems. As I mentioned, make them appropriate, make them challenging enough for a contractor to actually want to meet them, but not too challenging that they're never going to. Integrating sustainability objectives. You need to know what you're trying to integrate. How well do you know your policies for your organisation around sustainability? You do need to know those before you can actually put them in. You may well require specialised input, and actually identifying that and identifying the fact you need it, but also who you might need to bring in can be a little bit tricky. It could be around developing specifications, it could be around evaluation, it could be around market engagement, and the best way to look at that. Undertaking managing risk. Where's the best place for that risk and reward to sit? You also potentially reduce competition. This may seem an odd one on this one, but if it's only large organisations who have done this before, this way of contracting before, smaller ones might be a little bit nervous about entering into it. Part of your market engagement should be actually to put those fears at rest. If they still exist, actually work with those smaller organisations to see how it can be made forward. Don't risk losing a really good potential supplier because you are not prepared to put the work in up front. A lack of baseline data is a real challenge for contracting organisations, but you need that baseline data if you're actually measuring against it at a later date. Intellectual property rights often come up in these sorts of contracts, but again, work those out to begin with. Who has them? Is it the contracting authority that's going to own those rights, or is it going to be the supplier contractor? And make sure they're clear and make sure they're all thought out all the way through. These are just some of the challenges. You will actually come up with more, but just kind of work through them, be logical, and don't be put off by what can be a slightly daunting way of doing procurement if you're just not used to it. Thank you. That's my whistle-stop tour of POBS contracts. I hope you found it useful. For more information, please go to the SBP Regions site with a really good best practice report on POBS. It'll give you a lot more information and a lot more detail in what to back up what I've just said. Also on that site, there's other best practice reports and more how-to videos as well. Thank you very much.